welcome to Fan Made Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Porco, and this is the podcast where we speak to all fans in sports media and entertainment and ask them about how they've become a fan and some of their favorite parts of being a fan and going to games. And today I'm honored to speak with not only a notable sports media personality, you may have seen him on YouTube, on all over social media, on the radio, CBS Sports, but he's also been a good friend and mentor to me in sports media. You're for none other than JRSportBrief.
Thank you so much, Luke. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Of course, man. It's always good to talk to you, and I know this will be a fun interview and a fun chat, and I'm looking forward to getting started, and I appreciate you joining me.
No doubt about it.
So I always like to ask people whenever they come on the show, since this show is about like going to games and being a fan, I always ask this first. What was the first game you remember going to? And do you remember who you saw and who you went with?
Man, the first game that I see, it's scant details. I think the first sporting event that I ever went to that I remember a little bit. The New York Yankees were taking on the Montreal Expos in the old Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
And I think it was, I don't remember if I went with family or a school trip. It was late at night. Only person I remember is Don Mattingly. I was a kid, and I don't remember anything else about that. If I have to remember the first time I really remember going, as a kid, I didn't make it to a lot of sporting events. We didn't necessarily, have the cash to, go to Yankee Stadium all the time or go to the Garden. And so as much as I watched the Knicks growing up, I don't even think I would go to the circus as a kid a lot when the circus would come into town. But my first Knicks game had to have been maybe late 90s. I remember the Sacramento Kings came into town and they took on the Knicks, and that has to be maybe 98, 99. But that's the first game I really remember seeing.
Okay, yeah. So at least you saw them at a good time, especially that late '90s era.
Yeah, they were good. They were.
I mean, they're playing good now, but that team was legendary. And yeah, no, it's funny you mentioned Yankees Expos because that too was my first game at the old stadium. It was like late '90s. It was Yankees Expos as well too. And it's funny how you remember, even though they're now the Nationals, you still remember have love for the Expos and always have, especially seeing them in my first game.
This was a little bit earlier in either the end of the '80s or the early '90s.
Yeah, but still, it's cool we saw the Expos. So
back before they ceased to exist.
Yeah, wish they would bring them back. But what are you gonna do? But yeah, no. Now that speaking of that, as from going to games, do you remember witnessing any like records broken, or what's like the most exciting memory, like sports fan memory you've seen live, or like most?
I was in Madison Square Garden when Kobe Bryant went for, I want to say, was it 61 or 62 points? I think it was
61.
It was a Friday night. He had come into town. This had to have been maybe 2008, 2009. And I was fortunate enough to have sat like 3 rows behind the basket. So my uncle DJ'd at the Garden that night. Is a DJ named Fat Man Scoop. He worked at the time. And so I was doing work for him. And so I was fortunate enough to have sat in his seats of that night. And it was just kind of effortless. Maybe I was doing so much and running around so much that I didn't really, really pay attention. But, I looked up and it's just like, I've been sitting here watching almost all of the game. And just, it seemed so easy that Kobe just had 60 plus. It was too easy. It didn't even seem like it.
Yeah, no, I remember watching that game on TV. Like Kobe just made it like, he just did like he would put up like that, 61 points. Then when he did the one with 81 points, like he just did things so effortlessly. And you're very lucky to have seen him in person, like especially watching how like calm, cool, and collected he was like in person, and also like just watching on TV, just Like he just took over a game and he did it. I feel like he did it so effortlessly. Like he just had that. He was always locked in. And I
Yep. He took a
really love.
lot. He took a lot of shots all the time, but that's
Yeah, he
six.
did. But looking back, you kind of, especially that era in like 08, 09, when you look at like the roster. I mean, like, some of the players he had supporting him, like, yeah, he had like a soul and but like some of the some of the
Yeah.
teams he kind of had to, take over the game.
Yeah, I remember. I remember mostly. Pau Gasol was there with him, and then Lamar Odom.
Yep.
And anybody else is kind of a little bit of a little fuzzy at that time. But
Yeah.
I remember walking past Pau Gasol in the back in the hallway at Madison Square Garden, and we know Madison Square Garden has been renovated, by now.
Oh
And so
yeah.
some of the hallways and the tunnels and things
Yep.
were different. But I remember Pau Gasol. He's a real 7'1". He is not 6'10". Maybe getting older, maybe shrinking a little bit. He's a legit 7'1", and he walked by me, and I feel like I saw his foot kind of pass by me before I saw him. And it was just a cool night all the way around. It was a cool night.
That's awesome. Yeah. Definitely, cool times the Gardeners. Even if it's against the Knicks, like, it's still cool to just see NBA history because I always feel like it happens at the Garden between that and, Steph Curry when he broke the 3-point record. And, I always feel like it's exciting stuff to see at the Garden, even if it's against the Knicks or player on the Knicks. It's always cool to see. And yeah, no, another thing I want to talk about is how, like, you started your sports media career just from your YouTube and how that, just talking about like whatever was the trending topic and from going from that to now being on the radio, getting to go to all these like major events and you've interviewed like so many celebrities, athletes, like what, like if you could, tell yourself start like same JR from like, 09, 2010, who just started with YouTube, like if you were to give him like some advice or like, kind of tell him like this is where you're going to be, what would you tell him? And like, how do you expect like you would have reacted back?
I don't know. That's a very, very good question. And I don't think as many people that I talk to and have asked me, I don't think anybody's asked me like, hey, what would you tell yourself, in 2009? One thing that I've experienced and I like to share with folks as well is if you have a passion for something and you see some traction and I don't want to say you see the light at the end of the tunnel, don't be deterred or don't stop because you hear the word no. A lot of times folks hear the word no and then they automatically give it a hard stop or they quit or that they give up or they don't keep going. I'm sure that you or maybe some of the listeners and viewers have seen a cartoon at this point in time and it's just like two dudes digging with a pick and they're
Yeah.
trying to get to the gold or the diamond at the end. And
Hmm.
so one dude is like this close to getting to the diamond or the gold, and then the other person is this close and it's just automatically turned around and give
Yep.
up. And
Yes.
you never know how close you're gonna get to the success and reaching your goals if you don't keep going. When I started in 2009, I had a plan. I'd be lying to you if I said, I need to be on TV or this is the goal, or I need to do radio, this is the goal. I just knew if I can grow out an audience from scratch, then it would open up doors to more successes. And that's what it's done. I didn't have a limit to what I thought I could do, but I have faced plenty of no's. I mean, even in the early months of me starting on YouTube, there was a television producer at the time who worked at ESPN and just didn't understand what I was doing, didn't understand why somebody would care what I was saying on YouTube when they had a platform like ESPN. I could have decided to stop then, but I saw the growth of what I was doing on YouTube and said, if I can get 81 people to listen to what I'm saying, then there's something there, especially for digital media, where this is the way the world has gone, this is the way the world is going, and this is where we're at right now. And so that's one thing that I would say. If I had to go back, I'd say, yo, man, just keep on going.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And definitely, I feel like you were definitely ahead of your time when it came to like, because you were doing like more like a social media content creator before that was even really a thing, or, an occupation. But I feel like you were very like I'm glad you stuck with it. I'm sure very much your followers and listeners are too, and I'm sure you are too. But I'm just saying, I feel like you were very like being on YouTube. Like it wasn't as popular and like as many people were doing it then and through social media as they are now. So definitely, I appreciate. I'm sure you've inspired a lot of other content creators in the same field or similar areas to pursue their dream, and you should be applauded for that. And definitely, it's definitely inspiring. And like I said, you're definitely ahead of your time. I'm sure you've kickstarted a lot of other people's careers in the process as well too, without even realizing.
Yeah,
And
no, thank you, man. I appreciate it. And I have over the years, folks reach out and have asked me, how do you do this? Or I'm in school, I'm in college. How do I do this? My pathway is very different. I didn't go to a Syracuse, I didn't go to a Fordham. I went to Baruch College and studied business. I worked already in media. My first job, if you want to call it that, like I interned at Vibe magazine when magazines were still, any type of pop,
yeah,
but they were fading out. But they still Vibe magazine still held, a big important position in hip hop and music. Not so much now because magazines are done and it's
yeah,
difficult transitioning into digital. But yeah, I remember filming some of my first videos. A lot of people remember me inside with a Knicks banner. But then when I would go outside to film certain videos, and I would set up a camera because I couldn't, vlogging cameras didn't exist. The quality in the phones didn't exist now.
hmm
Technology has advanced a long way since when I got started in 2009. But I would record myself, and people would look at me or pass me by, and they looked at me at times like I was an alien. Like, why is this guy outside of Madison Square Garden or outside of the park or on the football field? Why is this guy recording himself? What is he doing? And then you fast forward to where we're at now in 2024. I can walk through a hotel lobby, I can go through a mall. Everybody is recording themselves. People have selfie sticks, people have
yeah,
tripods with lights on them, and it is so common. And for something that I was looked upon like, yo, what is this guy doing? So yeah,
yeah, no,
it's been fun to see how everything has evolved. But it's not surprising, man. That's why I started what I started, because if I wanted to go the traditional route, it wasn't gonna happen. I was already working, and I said, man, I can make money and earn a living doing this. If it was 4 years earlier, if somebody came to me, which is how I got started, a TV producer told me, why don't you start a sports blog? It wasn't an idea in the top of my head. A TV producer who had nothing to do with sports, his name is Fred Seibert. He ran Hanna-Barbera cartoons. He told me, why don't you start a sports blog and see where it goes? In any other world, maybe a couple of years earlier, if he said, hey, you should be a sports broadcaster, I'd have to do what most people do. I probably have to have gone to school, but that's the benefit of technology and the way media has changed.
yeah, no, for sure. And like you said, it's definitely you see like what was uncommon, 15 years ago or so is definitely like the norm now, and definitely applaud you for getting ahead of it and be, being like and getting involved and jumping in and finding your own path. And back to being in, getting to meet celebrity athletes and being interviewing people outside, whether it be stadiums or games or wherever. My question to you is, when you're at games, like what stadium or like sports city would you say has the best fans that you've come across, and like what are like some fun? Do you have any like fun stories around that or
Oh my God. I don't, I could sit here forever and tell stories. If you're asking me about sports, like best
like
sports,
fandom, like who's like the most like passionate?
that's tough. Every city is different. I'll tell you this, in a unique space, I really enjoy Pittsburgh. People are
Oh
very
yeah, Pittsburgh's
passionate
awesome.
about the Steelers. I have not been to Pittsburgh at a time where people did not want to talk about the Steelers.
Yeah,
the Steelers feel as big of a franchise as they are, and as big as a city as Pittsburgh is. When you're in Pittsburgh, it feels like the Steelers are the local high school team on the
Yeah,
biggest.
it's true.
And so you don't talk to anybody who's not ingrained. The temperature, not the actual temperature, but
Yeah.
the temperature and feeling and the vibe of the city really goes along with how the Steelers are performing, especially, during football season. And
Hmm.
I remember being in Pittsburgh maybe a year or two ago, a year and a half, and it was the end of the season. I think it might have been the last game for the Pirates. And
Oh,
I
okay.
walked by PNC Park. I didn't have a chance to go in, but I
Yeah.
was around near the
Yep.
baseball stadium. And I walked by like after the game let out. And of course they lost. And I was just, I'm not gonna say surprised, but I guess I was at how many people were leaving the game, the final game of the season. They stink, right? And everybody is all decked out in their Pirates gear. It's cold, it's wet, it's rainy. It's one of the typical Pittsburgh days without it being cold and frozen. And it didn't matter. These people were filing out from the Pirates, and I'm just like, they really rocking with them through whatever's going on. And so I can make a case for a lot of cities. I could talk about, how much folks in Los Angeles just really roll through the Lakers. We could talk about the fandom and in the Northeast with the Yankees and the Sox, et cetera, going to Chicago, maybe even go up into Green Bay. But I think Pittsburgh is just like, it's like, yeah, we're a big city, but we're real local with how we take our approach to our teams.
Yeah, I've always thought because I'm a Steeler fan myself, and I've been to Pittsburgh on several occasions, and yeah, I've always felt like Pittsburgh was like a big city, but like a small town in a big city. Like I feel like everybody, like those people are like the most like the friendliest people over there, like especially the neighborhoods by the stadiums. Like I feel like like you said, it's like even like if you're not wearing like you're just from out of town, people just start talking to you, like talking about obviously about the Steelers or any of the sports teams. But yeah, no, I've always felt like Pittsburgh was very passionate, very loyal when it comes to their fandom, and you know, and like I said, it's, like you mentioned, it's a small town, got that like they treat it like it's high school sports. And yeah, no, another question I had, what's your favorite like stadium you've ever been to, or arena that you have been to?
Oh man. Wow. Wow. I like the old Madison Square Garden. Um, I think there's a nostalgia feeling to it for me. Having been there to see like what I told you about Kobe's game,
Yep.
some of my earliest memories as a kid when I finally was able to go to a game at Madison Square Garden. I got a lot of memories from going to the circus. And so Madison Square Garden, before they switched the seats up,
Yeah.
where you
The
had
blue
purple,
seats.
purple and green, and now
Yep.
everything is all blue. That's a great place. I was fortunate enough to go to the Olympics in 2012 in London, and to go to Wembley and then check out a soccer match. And I believe I saw a soccer match between USA and Japan, and that was pretty cool. I've been to Germany with the Bundesliga. I went to BVB, it's black and yellow, and saw them. They got an entire wall of fans. There's just been a lot of different experiences that I've had from stadiums and arenas. But a lot of it most times isn't always about the game itself. It's about like the atmosphere that you have at the game, and what the fans are bringing to it. I saw Deontay Wilder get the snot knocked out of him by
Fury.
some Fury, yeah, and just all the fans there, even though the MGM Garden Arena isn't the most spectacular of arenas, the atmosphere in there was bananas. As the fans were just losing their minds. For Fury, so many folks coming over from the UK. I've seen Manny Pacquiao in there as well. So a lot of times it's the atmosphere and the fans that make the arena and give it personality. Otherwise, it'd just be a concrete place with seats.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of fans, if you could go to any, hypothetical like game or boxing, whichever sporting event you could go to, which one would it be? And if you had three people to bring, they could be famous, they could just be non-famous. What game are you going to, and who are you bringing?
Oh wow. Hmm. You know what? There's really one, and it can't happen anymore because she passed away. I would have loved to take my grandmother to a Yankees game and sit her behind home plate. She was a big Yankees fan. It was always cool to talk to her about baseball. There's that club behind Yankee Stadium that
Yep.
doesn't even feel like a baseball game where you're getting salmon and all this other good
Yeah,
food.
I know.
Yeah, that is one experience that I wish I was able to do. But for me, it's not so much about I want to go to this game or see this game. I've had so many amazing experiences right now, and at this stage for me, it's about sharing them because I'm fortunate. I can go to just about any sporting event, any game on earth that I want to just by putting in a credential. And so I'm fortunate, but also know that, like I told you, there was a time where I couldn't afford to go to a game, and so I understand both ends of it, and I don't take it for granted. So I'm very thankful and fortunate for all of my experiences, what I've done. So I'm cool on that. And if I could share some of this with other folks, that's what I'm looking forward to.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it's definitely like you said, it's definitely important to share, and that's very sentimental that you would take your grandmother, and that's all. I'm sure you would have a great time with her, and that's great to like go with the older generation, like past generation, just to hear about. Because I feel like baseball and especially football too, are like going back to like when you go with family or people from different generations, you still have that bond, but it's like you could talk about compare like different generations, but also has it's still the same team, so you definitely have that. And yeah, no, another like last question I like to ask, if you were to talk, if you met somebody who had never been to, let's just use this as an example, like never been to like a Knick game or a game at Madison Square Garden, it was like their first game. What are like some tips, recommendations that you give to them about going to the game, and like what are like some like traditions that you like to go to whenever you go to like a Knick game or something, like what,
Man,
like, is there a special like food you like or something you like to like always make a tradition of?
no, man, because I'm cheap. I'm
Let's
cheap,
keep
man.
on. Let's just all hypothetical. So
No,
it's
yeah, it's a little different, but it's special. Madison Square Garden is a special place. For me, growing up in the Bronx, every time I went to Madison Square Garden, it was like it was not a trek, but it was an experience because it wasn't just up. We popping up at the game. We're here. It wasn't like I was in Madison Square Garden all the time, so it was a real special experience. Maybe I went, once a year or once every other year, and we would get on the two train, whether it was me, my mom, or uncle, or aunt, or whoever we were going with. We're getting on the two train, and we're going right into Penn Station and going right through Penn Station, walking up the steps and going into the garden. And so that is a unique experience unto itself. Growing up as a kid, until I got older, to go to all these different arenas and stadiums, it wasn't, you realize it's not normal. You go to most arenas and stadiums, yeah, they can be in downtown areas. The train station might be across the street, or you may drive and park or what have you. Going to Madison Square Garden and taking the train by itself
Mhm.
is almost it's an experience just to go ahead and do it and funnel up upstairs into the
Yeah,
garden, and then you go, wait a minute, the arena floor is upstairs, it's not downstairs
yeah,
on the
no,
ground. It's very unique, going to MSG. But for me, it's that subway ride on the two train,
yeah,
getting off at 34th Street, Penn Station, going through Penn Station, which was pretty ratty when I
yeah,
was a kid, and then going upstairs to the garden and then smelling the popcorn when you start
yeah.
getting upstairs and smelling the hot dogs. Madison Square Garden just has that smell.
Hmm.
It's a classic experience that, I won't forget. It's changed a lot.
It
Things
has.
are much more sanitized, but
Yeah.
It's a little bit different.
Although
Those
I
are
do say the one thing I do like about the new garden is that they widened the concourse, like the walkways, because the old garden it was so tight. It felt like, and they had like the steel, like the tin wall, like hallway, walls and stuff. It was all so cramped in there. So I feel like, I do like that they kind of space it out a little more. But
yeah,
yeah,
man.
no, the old garden was
I
definitely,
don't. I could say the same thing for the old Yankee Stadium. Little
yeah,
strange for me, but it's the nostalgia factor. You
yes,
know, I don't care now, but to exit an event at Madison Square Garden where everybody had to, kind of go down the steps or the escalator,
escalators, yeah,
packed like sardines, trying to get out on the little corners.
yeah,
Um, it's nostalgic to think about, man.
yeah, for sure. No, it's definitely, yeah. And now that you're in Atlanta, like, have you been to any, games like when whether it be Hawks or even, when you come back to New York, do you ever get to go to? Have you been to any like Knick games since you've moved or?
So I haven't been to any Knick games in a few years, but man, I get out to just about every and anything. I can't keep track on how many events I go to. I get to New York quite often, and I'll go out to even Red Bull Stadium, or I've been to
Yeah,
Yankee Stadium a million times since I've been gone. So when I'm up in New York, if I have time, I pop in at the events. When I'm here in Atlanta, especially with my current on-air shift, I'm on air at 6 p.m. Eastern time, and so I don't get to go to as many games. But
yeah,
I am out at a crap ton of Hawks games. I get out to Mercedes Benz. I go up to see the Braves in Truist Park. And so when I have time, I make it out to tons of sporting events. I get invited to more things than I can make it to. And here, to be honest, the facilities are all new and beautiful. I think State Farm Arena is probably one of the best arenas I've ever been to in the country from everything that you can get. Mercedes Benz is also a brand new place replacing the Georgia Dome. And
yep,
that place is spick and span. I really appreciate what the Falcons do. A lot of the food options. Yeah, you can hang out in the suite and get gourmet stuff. But then they also have, decent food options that cost enough. You can get $5 for a hot dog or a beer. They're not pricing people out. And then the Brave Stadium at Truist is pretty nice too. And a Yankee Stadium, don't get me wrong.
yeah,
Well,
yeah. No, I hear you.
but the concept of it is pretty good too.
Yeah, no, that's cool, and I do respect even though you've made your career in sports media, you're still a fan at heart, and that's what we love to see. That's why one of the reasons one of the reasons why I want to get you on because I know like you could see you on Instagram or Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. You're still out here, like you're still just like a fan at heart, and that's very respectable. And I'm sure a lot of other people have, like I said, like have been in your want to be in your shoes or have just followed a similar path. But yeah, no, it's definitely respectable. Like I said, like the name of this show is Fan Made, and JR is definitely fan made. And before you go, JR, would you like to give the listeners just a place where they can follow you or hear you on the radio or what have you?
Easy. I am everywhere accessible at JR Sport Brief. I host the JR Sport Brief show on CBS Sports Radio weekdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 Pacific. And then I'm up in New York on Saturday afternoons on WFAN. So JR Sport Brief everywhere, online, on the radio, all that good stuff.
Right there you have it. He is JR Sport Brief and he is fan made. Thanks, JR, for joining me. And thanks to everybody listening. Please give me a follow, like, subscribe on Instagram, at YouTube at Fan Made Podcast, and on Twitter at Fan Made with LP.